getting Elevate to where we are today and with the speakers that are here.
Martha Stewart, everyone. Former First Lady of the United States.
Commander Chris Hadfield.
ACON.
Mr. Bill Morneau.
Join us in uniting the world's innovators to solve society's greatest challenges.
Bad times usually create great companies.
You can either help this issue around income inequality, or you can bulletproof your Tesla.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 9 of Elevate Live. My name is Lisa Zarzechny, and I'm the co-founder and vice president of programming here at Elevate, and I'm really excited to be your host for this week's episode. Now, up this week, we have none other than Arlene Dickinson herself, here to talk to us with us about a very, very important topic, all about reinvention, both personal and professional. And don't worry, we'll make sure that we leave lots of time so that you get to ask Arlene some of your most pressing questions around this topic or anything else on your mind. If you don't have a question, but if you see something that you think should be asked, just give it an upvote and we'll make sure it moves to the top of our list. Next week, make sure that you tune in for Elevate Live. We've got the co-founder and CEO of unicorn cloud storage company Box on the show. Aaron's going to be with us to talk about work unleashed, where, when, and how work is changing. Obviously, a very important topic at this time. Okay, but now I am so excited to introduce our guest for this week's episode, Arlene Dickinson. Arlene is an accomplished investor. She's an accomplished entrepreneur. You probably know her for her role as a dragon on CBC's hit show Dragon's Den. She is also the general partner of District Ventures Capital. And I don't know where she found the time, but she's also the author of 3 best-selling books. Her latest book, Reinvention, really has formed the basis of our conversation here today. But personally, why I'm so excited to welcome Arlene to the show is I've been a personal fan of hers for a very long time. As I've been coming up in my own professional career, I've always looked to Arlene. I've seen her on TV play this big role. I've seen her build these incredible companies and give back and support the community and support our ecosystem. And as I've watched her do that, I've thought to myself, maybe I can do that too. So with that being said, Arlene, welcome to today's show.
Thank you so much, Lisa. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Awesome. All right, well, let's dive in. I'd actually like to start with your own personal story. You've shared it before, and I found it really touching. You've talked about being 30 years old and finding yourself in a really tough situation. You were unemployed with a high school diploma. You had just been recently divorced and had lost custody of your 4 kids. And then fast forward a short time later, and you'd completely recreated both your personal and your professional life. You founded Venture Communications and not only started a company, but you scaled it to employing 50 people. And so my first question to you is, how did you do that? How did you get from point A to point B? Bringing yourself out of a less than stellar situation and building a business from scratch.
It's interesting. When I think back on those days, I often kind of go, that was such a time in my life where I really had to dig deep and figure out what it was I was capable of. And, I really believe that there are moments in our life when things happen that actually create the need for us to reinvent ourselves or to change. And for me, it was this situation I found myself in, which was, I didn't have a university education. I wasn't skilled in anything, and I had no money. And so necessity was what drove me. I mean, I still had joint custody of my children, and I needed to provide for them and myself. And my dad had taught me at a very young age that we needed to rely on ourselves and our own, hard work and our own efforts to take care of our families. And so I I found the will to do that, and actually it was simply because I didn't have any other choice. I mean, I'd love to say it was because I had this big plan, but I didn't have any other choice. I got invited to join venture. It was a company that had already been in business for a few years, Lisa, and so I got invited to join as a partner, but that meant that I could come and work for free because they couldn't afford to pay me, and I had nothing else to do. And so I just decided to take that leap and go ahead and try, and that's what I did.
Well, you certainly managed to accomplish incredible things. So again, I mean, kudos to you. I think that's just such an inspiring story. Fast forward a little bit again. I mean, you go and you help venture communications grow into an incredible business that it continues to be. And then Calgary gets hit with a devastating flood. And so you were once again forced to transform and reinvent your business and yourself. And so I want to talk a little bit about the aftermath of that flood. What helped you to succeed after that setback?
That happened at a point in my life. I mean, to everybody who's listening to this, I mean, you think that at some point in business that you can kind of take your foot off the gas or your eye off the, you can kind of relax a little bit because you've been doing it for so long and things are going to be fine, and you feel a little more calm about you're going to survive. And so that was where I found myself when that flood happened. I had been in business at that point for almost 30 years. And, it was one of my businesses. I was doing many other things. Venture was one of the businesses I had. And I wasn't, working in it full time. And then that flood happened. And I really had to reassess whether or not this business that had actually brought me to where I was in my life was one I was going to continue to support. And it actually just took me so by surprise, Lisa. I would tell you that, I'm bumping along, I'm doing my thing, I'm building businesses, I'm having fun, I'm investing, I'm all this stuff. And then a flood happens, the last thing I would have expected in Calgary. And it just took me by such surprise, and it was really difficult. And so I had to kind of think about, do I shut the business down or do I continue to build it and grow it? And I just thought about all the people I employed and the opportunity to reinvent it. And I decided to rely on my team and to come up with an idea of how we could get out of this, the mess we were in, basically, because the business was in such dire straits. And it took a lot of effort and a lot of work, but it was the best thing at the end of the day that could have happened to us, because it made us rethink everything, like literally everything. We had to rethink who we were, what we wanted to be, and how we were going to become a different type of agency moving forward.
Wow, that's incredible. And so I want to dive a little bit deeper into kind of that process of reinvention, because I think that's really important. And in your book, you lay out the 4 C's to reinvention. Our audience loves practical and actionable insights. They ask us for it all of the time from our guest speakers. And so tell us more, what are the 4 C's?
Well, when the flood happened, and I was trying to figure out what to do, I actually was turned to the same business strategies and advice that I would give to clients. And that process, that structured process of reinvention helped me to reinvent not just the company, but myself. And so the first one is counterintuitive. I mean, it's very counterintuitive because in business, we tend to, we want to move forward all the time. We want to just keep going. We're always thinking about the future. And it's same in life. And what we really have to do is we have to think backwards. We have to re-examine what got us where we are. What are the things that led us to the place we are at? And by understanding that, which is counterintuitive as opposed to wanting to move forward, you have to think backwards. By doing that, you start to understand how you got where you are. And that's retrospection and introspection is very difficult to do. And none of us like to do it because none of us really want to, think about all the bad things and then the mistakes we've made. But that's actually what helps us. So that's step 1. Step 2 is, I call it currency, which is, what is it you're good at? We all are good at something. And whether that's you're talking about personal reinvention or professional reinvention, figure out what your currency is. And by that, I mean, the thing that you have that nobody else has. And everybody has a skill, everybody has a talent, everybody has a gift, everybody has a different perspective. And when we can find what our currency is, whether it's, whether we're good at baking, whether we're good at helping people, whether we're good, whatever that thing is. I mean, we all have a skill. So figure out what your currency is, figure out what your past has been, figure out what you've learned from your past and what your currency is today. And then the third C is understand your core purpose. We talk a lot in life about finding your passion. But I really believe that when you find your purpose, your why, the reason that you get out of bed every day, and understand that you can start to figure out how you want to reinvent yourself to serve that purpose. And so finding your purpose is, I believe, fundamental. And then the final C is context. And when I say that, if you think about the context of the world we're living in, particularly this is true today as we think about the context of what's going on around us. You can't reinvent yourself in a silo. You have to reinvent yourself in the context of everything that's happening in the world. And what does the world need? And what can you give the world back? And so, as we think about reinvention, if you think about being a little bit counterintuitive to think backwards before you can move forwards. The currency, what is it you're good at? Finding your core purpose and then putting it all in the context of the world that you're living in and applying that, then you can reinvent yourself in a meaningful way. It is a process. It is not easy work. It is not something you just get up one day and say, hey, I'm going to be, a skydiver. You've got to learn how to skydive before you can become one. So I think anything that you want to do, you've got to train yourself for, and reinvention is no different. It takes planning and it takes process. But it is possible. And the other thing I'd say that I talk a lot about in the book, Lisa, is one of the key elements is, at least I believe it, is saying it out loud. Sometimes things aren't real until we actually say them. We want to be something and we think it in our heads, but we don't dare say it out loud because then, people might think we're crazy. But it doesn't matter if people think we're crazy. It doesn't matter what anyone else thinks of your aspirations. But when you start to say it out loud and let people hear you and you repeat it to yourself and you say it out loud to your friends and family and anyone who will listen, it starts to cement the path that you need to move forward because it starts to define the goal that you have, not just in your own head, but everyone else starts to understand it and support it as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I love that. And I agree with your comment too. I don't think, as many times as I would say that I wanted to be a skydiver out loud, that would ever come true for me. And so I want to step back because you referenced it, and I think it's really important right now. And I think a lot of our viewers are looking for this advice, this idea around context. Life within the past 3 months has changed so much when we were hit with a global pandemic. And as companies are looking to pivot their operations, it's a whole different landscape out there today. And it might be a whole different landscape in 6 months' time, in a year's time, we're not really sure. And I think that's one of the challenging things is context is shifting so rapidly. And so when you look at today's world or start to look into the future, what opportunities do you think people trying to reinvent themselves or their company should be attuned to right now?
It's a question I'm asked almost daily. And I think part of the opportunity is in the situation we're in the world. I mean, there's so much going on, and there's a whole other conversation to have probably around all the things that are happening, because I do think society in itself needs to reinvent itself. I mean, in general, we need to really be thinking about so many things that are happening in the world. But I if you're in business right now and you're thinking about the context, I would say that one of the things you need to do is really, you have to kind of rework the old, and you have to get yourself ready to launch yourself or relaunch yourself into the future. We don't know exactly what the future is, but we do know that what is probably not going to work into the future. And this is a chance for you to look at your digital assets, to think about your website, to think about how you interact with clients, to think about what it is you want to be. This is a chance to reinvent your businesses and yourself. And I do, a lot of people were at the beginning of all this pandemic, there were a lot of people saying, don't make people feel like they have to change right now, just get through it. And that's true too. Like, you have to be able to be strong enough personally to be able to withstand it. But I kind of think it's maybe a bad analogy, but I'm going to use it anyhow, which is, I often think, if I wanted to lose weight as an example, and, I would say, oh, it's going to take me 6 months to lose that weight. It's going to take forever to do it. So I'm not, it just seems daunting to me. So it's going to take too long. So I'm not going to, I won't focus on it because it's overwhelming to me. And then 6 months goes by and I think, gee, that 6 months happened. I wish I'd focused on doing what I wanted to do and focused on my fitness and my health over those last 6 months. I mean, how many of us regret that we didn't take the time that we had to do something good with it? So I would encourage everybody to think about taking this time to think about the assets you have, to relaunch yourself, to work on wanting people to be able to do business with you. That may seem odd, but I think one of the things that we don't spend enough time on is deciding whether or not we're creating something that people will want to interact with and people will want for the future. And that takes entrepreneurialism, and that takes courage, and that takes a little bit of understanding what people are needing right now and thinking about the zeitgeist of what is going on out there and applying your skills to that. And again, that's the context of the world. It is changing, but at the core of it, humans have fundamental needs, fundamental desires, a fundamental belief in what's happening in the world is going to get better, and we all want hope. So, apply all of those things to what you can help people get to, so you can help them get to a place that they actually can to live better lives. It's complicated, but it's actually not, because at the end of the day, we all are pretty basic in terms of what we need to feel good about ourselves. And when we can help people get there, I think we win, both emotionally and socially.
Yeah, I think that's great, and that's something that that we as a company at Elevate thought a lot about with what you said about really trying to provide value to our partners and customers, even if there wasn't a clear path to monetization. But we wanted just to make sure that we were trusted and a valued partner to these organizations. And when we see some of the feedback and what's coming back from our viewers, I'm so incredibly touched by it. We had someone write in and say, you guys have no idea the intellectual lifeline you're providing right now. And that just encouraged all of us, all the team who's been working so hard on what, Elevate Live week after week, to continue down that path of provide value first, and really work to deepen and strengthen relationships with all of our partners. So I want to jump off. Oh, go ahead.
I apologize. I was just going to really say I commend you for what you guys are doing, because I think that I think creativity is fundamental to us getting through this, and encouraging creativity, whether it's intellectual stimulation or whether it's helping people to apply creativity in a way that they aren't right now, to help them get out of the mindset of negativity that's out there, and not thinking about monetization, but thinking about doing the right thing and helping people. I think that's the change that we all need to see. Certainly, we're all in businesses and we all need to make money. But at the end of the day, if we start from a place of trying to help others and to figure out a way to build an organization that people will want to be associated with, then everybody will win.
Totally. So I want to touch on, you've said something that really resonated to me, and I want to dive in a little deeper. I think in Reinvention, you said, after the flood and when you were really forced to look back, you found that you weren't the entrepreneur that you aspired to be. I look at that and I'm like, but you were so successful. So can you dive in? What did you mean by that? What does being an entrepreneur mean to you?
That was probably the most unexpected outcome of the reinvention process for me, was really understanding that I wasn't the entrepreneur that I thought I was. I mean, I was running a great small business, and I was involved in small business as I was investing. I was doing all those things, but I wasn't really pushing myself to do something that I thought was possible and needed to happen that no one else had done before. And I kept thinking about my, a fund in Canada that was going to focus on the food and the health space and consumer goods. And I kept thinking about it. But I just, and I would get no's, and I would get people telling me that I was crazy for even thinking about it, because, people invest in technology, they don't invest in food. And food is not the returns aren't the same, all of these things. And I kept thinking about it. And then I finally decided that if I really wanted to reinvent myself, I had to take a bigger risk. And I had to dream in a way that I didn't kind of temper myself. And I had spent my career being told no a lot. And I started to marginalize my own expectations as a result. I was happy, I was successful, but I wasn't really pushing any boundaries and barriers around doing something that no one else had done before. And to me, that is true entrepreneurialism. It's the dream to do something that you see that nobody else sees, and then having the courage to kind of push through that. And I hadn't really done that. And so I just set out to raise a fund. I was a female general partner in Canada. That the odds were stacked against me. I was doing it in a space that people weren't finding as sexy because it was food and health companies. I was doing all of these things. But at that moment, when I said I was going to do that, Lisa, is when I really realized that that's what entrepreneurialism is. And that's that big leap that you take where you put everything behind it because you believe so strongly in something that you're going to go at it. And I had been, as I said, running great businesses and investing, but I wasn't as entrepreneurial as I thought I was.
Well, it's so incredible to see that boldness and that risk paid off. Right. And so, one of the things that I wanted to chat about was more about District Ventures Capital, because, you've had a pretty big accomplishment recently. On April 6th, just this past year, District Ventures, you announced that you closed your first fund of $100 million. And I just want our viewers to be really aware of how monumental that is. I think it's one thing when you look at raising, multi-millions of dollars when we talk about enterprise SaaS, or if you talk about artificial intelligence. But as you mentioned, the food, beverage, health and wellness is a completely different sector, and $100 million is almost unprecedented. So, congratulations, first of all, but then what was the biggest hurdle in raising that fund?
I hadn't raised a fund before. I'd invested, as I said, on my own and in other funds, and I'd invested in angel investing and early stage investing, but I'd never raised a fund. And you would think, because I'm a dragon and I have profile, you would think it would be pretty simple to go out and raise capital. Well, I got to tell you, it's not. It was hard. It was hard work. And I feel blessed that I did have the kind of warm welcome of people knowing who I was. So I didn't have that barrier, but I had the barrier of not ever having raised a fund before. I had the barrier of trying to do it in a sector and industries that people were not investing in. And I had the barrier of it being so female, first-time fund, and in a new space, a new sector. And so these were major hurdles that I really had to find investors and LPs that were going to believe in the thesis of the fund and understand the importance and the value of food and health as it related to not just societal good, but financial ability to provide return. And I never had so many no's in my life. I went meeting after meeting after meeting. I continually was knocking on doors. That whole take 100 no's to get to the one yes. Man, that is so true, you guys. Like, you're going to get a lot of no's. You're going to get a lot of people telling you that's nice. And if you can find another lead investor, we'll come along and you let us know how that goes for you. I mean, Canadians are very good at polite no's. Let me tell you, I've heard lots of very polite no's, very kind no's, but at the end of the day, no's. And I just learned to just keep going. And partway through, I was starting to raise, and I'll share a story. I was at about $16 million, and I'd always had in my mind that I wanted to raise $100 million. And people kept telling me that it was too big, that it was a first time fund. And you can't raise $100 million. Like, don't even go out there and say that you want to raise $100 million. It's too much. And I didn't understand that. I thought, why is that too much? Like, that should be feasible. This is a huge opportunity. I mean, there's US funds in this space that are multi-billion dollar funds. Why in Canada can't I raise 100 million? But I kept hearing that. So finally I had to just kind of change the goalpost for what I said, but I never changed the goalpost in my mind of what I wanted to do. So I'd say to people, I want to get to $25 million. And meanwhile, I'm thinking I'm going to get to $100 million come hell or high water. But I wouldn't say it out loud because people were, they weren't as keenly keen believers, I guess I would say. And I almost quit $1 million because I'd had so many no's, and I thought I'll never get, and $25 million isn't going to be what we need. We need to really have this fund be big, because it's got to be big enough to create an ecosystem around it, and an accelerator and all the other things that I wanted to do to help support the deal flow for the fund. And I called a friend and I said, I can't do this anymore. I've had so many meetings and things are not going well. And I just, I don't want to raise a $25 million fund. And it's just not, I want to raise $1 billion platform. I want to get to $1 billion platform. That's what I want to get to. And he paused on the phone and he said to me, Arlene, smarten up. Like, yeah, it's hard. And yeah, you've been at this for a couple of years of fundraising, and yeah, you haven't gotten there yet, but you have a vision that's real and important. And so get up tomorrow, put your pants on, go out there, keep raising, keep at it, going, don't quit. And because I had people like that who encouraged me, I stayed at it.
Yeah, wow. And I think back, I think that's where, knowing your core purpose and knowing your why to get out of bed every day and to continue to go to bat and get turned down time and time again becomes so important in those situations. So you made reference to it. District Ventures is a really unique company and a unique model, with a fund, of course, with investment, with an accelerator as well. And the companies that you're supporting, are again within that kind of food, beverage, health and wellness space. It's no secret that the hospitality sectors, restaurants have been hit so hard by COVID-19. What have you been hearing from your companies during this time? Our portfolio is actually really interesting. Many of the companies we're dealing with are doing very well through the pandemic because they have staples, or their products are ones that people are seeking out right now. The food and health space has become a very important space in all of our lives. We're all thinking about what we're consuming. We're all thinking about our health and our well-being. So the thesis of the fund is actually playing very well into a condition in the marketplace that is very unfortunate. But what's happening is these Canadian businesses, these small businesses, for the most part, are surviving and doing quite well. But there are some of them, and I'd say in general, they're all there's a little bit of fear. They don't know if this is going to, what's going to happen through this. There's distribution models have changed. It's harder to get listings. It's harder to build the businesses. Capital is definitely difficult to get a hold of. There's lots of programs out there, but are they going to come soon enough? There's businesses every stage along the way, and outside of the food and health space, the businesses I'm talking to are very concerned because they're basically being put into hibernation. The programs we've got are helping them kind of keep the lights on, and they may help them keep some people employed. But a lot of these early stage innovative companies don't have a lot of employees. They don't have the ability they have no credit rating. They've used their credit cards. They've used their they've got personal guarantees everywhere. So it's very hard for early stage innovative companies, whether they're in food or health or tech or any industry, any sector, to be able to understand exactly how to navigate through these times.
And so I would encourage you to, again, you're going to have to think hard about, can you pivot? Can you talk to somebody who's going to support you? Can you think of new ways to make sure that you're getting capital in the door? But just shuttering down for a few months while we're going through a pandemic is not going to be a solution. Because when you come out of it, you're going to have to be ready to be able to grab the marketplace that is there. So it requires a lot of heavy lifting and a lot of strategy, and most of these companies are seeking that kind of help right now. So look for mentors, look for strategic assistance. I think marketing is pivotal right now to making sure that your markets even understand you exist, and your digital presence is very, very important.
Yeah, I mean, in addition to all of that, what we've been hearing a lot is that for many founders and business leaders, this is the first time that they've ever gone through or experienced a crisis like COVID-19. And so they're, asking themselves so many questions that they just don't have the answers to. So I think, finding a mentor or people who have experienced recessions or kind of disruptions before is a great start. What other lessons can we learn from this crisis to help us emerge stronger, both as, and there's 3 levels of that, I think, as individuals, as companies, and our opportunity as a society right now?
This last week, as I said earlier, this last week has just been such a sobering week for all of us relative to what's happening in the world and in society. And I guess, reinventing requires all of us to think hard about what we can do to change. And just like business needs to change, people need to change. And we need to think hard about the role we all play in helping others move forward. And so I would say that, part of me wants to say, on the positive side, ignore the news if you can. Don't spend so much time focusing on the news that you get. You get this inertia as a result of it. If you get too much negativity, if you get too focused on all of the things other people are saying, then you don't know how to act for yourself. So I would say, try to not focus so much on the news and on your Twitter feeds and on your Instagram feeds and Facebook, that you get kind of lost in others' views and thoughts, and don't take the time to just really kind of center yourself. And I believe that I've said it earlier, but I believe creativity is a secret guide here. So go back to playing with your kids, and go back to listening to what your kids are saying, and go back to thinking about what matters to you, and go back to the fundamentals, and caring about other people more than you are caring about what's on what other people's opinions are, caring about what other people are actually experiencing and helping them. So I think if you start there, you can get through this. But we do need to all focus on staying creative, staying innovative, listening to podcasts, listening to, joining Elevate sessions like this, where you're hearing from people who have experienced the hardness and the hardship of recessions and challenges and all of those things, and learn from them, but also kind of use your own brains to think about a path forward that's going to work for you.
Yeah, I think finding creativity becomes so important, and it's something that we've heard from other leaders as well. We had Mark Cuban on the show a few weeks ago, and we asked him, out of everyone right now, who are you getting your inspiration from? And it was touching. He said his kids. He said he was drawing all of his inspiration, creativity, love, and passion right now from his kids, which I thought was a really touching story to hear from him. Last question here, and then we'll move over to our next segment. But something that I wanted to make sure we brought up, you're very active on social media. You've got a really large following and a large presence. And recently you raised $500,000 for the Calgary Food Bank on Twitter. And so I just, I want to commend you for this and ask you, why did you choose to do this? Why did you think, Calgary Food Bank is the recipient? And why do you think it received so much traction online?
Thanks, Lisa. I mean, thanks to everybody who contributed to that campaign. It was just so, it touched me in so many ways. It was just so amazing to get their support we did get. And, what started off as me talking to my family and saying, we need to do something. We live in a city, and Calgary in particular in Alberta has been very hard hit because of the energy sector and what's happened with the energy sector and that's already had impact on employment rates here and the economy here, obviously. And then on top of that, we've got COVID happening. And so we had all of these things happening, and the unemployment rate here was quite high. And I could see the need. And I was talking to the food bank, and I realized that they were getting 400 calls a day from people looking for food on top of their already busy need that they were serving. And it just struck me. I saw another campaign that was happening in Ottawa, and I thought, I can do something. I can do something. And I talked to my family. We said, well, let's talk to the mayor. Let's see if we can get the mayor involved, and we'll do $1 for every retweet, and we'll give $10,000. And like I saw immediately that we got to 10,000 retweets so fast. And I thought, man, there is a huge need out there. And people were saying, well, what can I do to help? How can I support? And so I reached out to my network, and I literally had no shame. I called everybody I could call. I talked to everybody I could call across the country. I said, hey, we have a need here. This is a big need in Calgary. And people they dug deep. Everybody, from $1 to $10,000, everybody gave. And within 9 days, we had $512,000 raised. And it was because people are, I get back to it. We all want to help each other through this, and we all can understand and commiserate and empathize with people who don't have food to eat right now. I mean, that should be nobody in Canada. And so it was a cause that mattered to me. Somebody who I grew up with, we were very, very poor when I grew up. Groceries were a luxury to us. And I understand what it's like to not have food in your home. And so this was something that mattered to me, to see what I could do to support the community. And it really, we gave $10,000. That was, in the scheme of things, what we ended up with was $512,000 that gave the food bank the ability to give $2.5 million worth of food to the community.
Wow, I just think that's so incredible. So again, kudos to you and to everyone who donated and supported. And I think we can continue to keep thinking about how we can support our communities and organizations like those when they need it the most right now. Okay, we are now going to move over to our highly anticipated rapid fire segment. This week is Invest or Pass. So Arlene, our viewers have sent in their business pitch ideas, and we'd like to see if you would invest in that company and that idea, or if you are going to pass on it. And one sentence as to why. Okay, so our first company is Well-Beings. It's a corporate wellness platform for keeping remote workforces healthy.
How long do I have? It's rapid fire, so I got to decide really quick.
On the spot.
I would invest. I would invest because right now we're all trying to find ways to make sure that our workforces are mentally and physically healthy. So, and happy. So yeah, I'd invest.
Awesome. Okay, I would encourage the founder of Well-Beings to get in touch with Arlene. Our second idea, just kidding. Okay, our second idea is, this is a mouthful. Okay, this is an agri-tech vertical hydroponic modular farming system. Invest or pass?
Invest. I have looked at this type of business before, and I love it because, being able to grow produce and be able to provide fresh produce into remote communities, in particular in Canada, is critical. And I love the notion of this, and I have seen businesses in this space, and I've looked at investing, so invest.
Okay, amazing. All right, we're 2 for 2. Okay, the next idea is a personalized AI-driven nutritionist bot that checks in on eating habits daily.
I might pass on that one, only because that's a really crowded space right now, and there's a lot of people trying to do that. And then not that you couldn't also be really successful at it, but I think, yeah, I probably would pass.
Okay, all right, no hard feelings
Sorry.
there. And on to our fourth and our final pitch. It is a marketplace for Zoom-based health and fitness classes.
Oh man. Now I'm feeling bad. I probably would pass on that too, because there's a lot of there are a lot of people doing exactly this, and it would be really hard to kind of make sure that you were consolidating all of the right ones, and you're also going up against some fairly major. I don't know. Not to say that you shouldn't, because I actually like small businesses going after big businesses, but this is a tough one because I think it's going to take a lot of effort and a lot of time to really get it going. So sorry. Now I feel really bad.
No hard feelings, no hard feelings. Okay, we also polled our audience to find out what pitch idea they thought would be the most successful. And it came back a resounding, they wanted to invest in the corporate wellness platform. So that was what our audience had to think about those 4 ideas.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks, Arlene. That was a lot of fun. And now, and right before we kick off and get to our Q&A and see what questions you've got for Arlene, we want to Zoom bomb. This week, we've got Kayla Isabel. Kayla is the Executive Director for Startup Canada. Startup Canada is one of my favorite organizations. It's a national organization that supports entrepreneurs and founders as they grow and scale their businesses in all areas of Canada. And I mean, talk about baptism by fire. Kayla started this new role at Startup Canada 2 weeks before the global pandemic hit here in Canada, and we instituted a work from home. And so we wanted to give Kayla the opportunity to ask Arlene what's on her mind these days.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lisa. And thank you to the entire Elevate team for organizing these incredible sessions week after week. Really, really incredible to see this program come to life. And thank you, Arlene, for taking the time. Like you, Lisa, I've been so inspired by your story, Arlene, your multiple moments of reinvention, and really taking advantage of those moments to reassess everything. Many entrepreneurs that we're speaking to at the moment are in that space, and under this specific context, that's more important than ever. So my question is really looking, in addition to this idea of reinvention, what comes next for startups when they look to grab that future marketplace? Even, it's sort of an unknown future space. But my question is twofold. As we restart the economy under this new context, what roles do you see entrepreneurs, particularly startups, playing in the future of Canada's prosperity as a nation? So that's sort of the first section of the question. And then 2, specifically looking at women, Indigenous entrepreneurs, marginalized communities. We were speaking about that earlier, and the importance of really championing and advocating for those voices. How do we rebuild and support Canada's entrepreneurship ecosystem with a stronger foundation post-COVID-19?
Oh, those are great questions. I think, listen, the startup community is integral to an economy. And I believe that innovation happens, that very, very important, agile group of people who are willing to start businesses up at a time when things are hard to begin with in the past, but even worse today. And so keep your community sacred and supported and funded and encouraged is, to me, the most important. Because that innovation, if we lose that person who is thinking about doing things differently and has the courage to step into that, then we lose the opportunity to really have the future economy. And so from my belief is startup and early stage companies need a ton of support right now, that we have to support them, that we can't ignore them, that they are under a lot of fire. And we have to do everything we can to give them the tools they need so that they can survive, because they really are the future of our economy. And so I'd say let's support them. I mean, to your other question, I'd say COVID-19 has had a disproportionate effect on women and people of color, and I imagine that includes entrepreneurs on whole. And I think we have to look out for entrepreneurs from marginalized communities and make sure that we're creating conditions for them to be successful. I would be remiss if I didn't take a moment to just talk about what's happening around this. I'm super hopeful that this public unrest that we are witnessing creates real change, and in particular for Black entrepreneurs. The narrative is changing, and people are becoming more aware of the injustices that the Black community has been facing. But the reality is that permanent and positive change takes time. And so my hope is that, we take this pivotal time in history, and that we think about what we can do, not just for the near term, but obviously for the long term, and that we think hard about helping, Black entrepreneurs, people of color entrepreneurs, female entrepreneurs, any marginalized community, any community of entrepreneurs who require support and assistance, that we're really focusing on that, not just now, but into the future, because now is the light is being shone on it, but it's what we do with it next that actually is going to matter the very, very most. So this is very important to me. And I think racial injustice and racial inequality and what we're seeing in the world right now needs to be addressed. And I'm glad that people are paying attention.
Completely agree. Thanks, Arlene.
Awesome, Kayla. Thank you so much for Zoom bombing in this week.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, now we get to move over to our audience Q&A. Okay, so Arlene, Greg asked it and our viewers upvoted it. It is the most upvoted question, so we've got to ask it first. For one piece of advice for non-essential businesses during this time. So one piece of advice for non-essential businesses.
I can't say it enough. Like, focus on your digital strategy. You may not be an essential business as it relates to everyday needs that people have, but if you have a service or a product that people could use, or could help their life be better in some way, or could actually increase their happiness quota, or whatever that you offer, you have to be present online. So I would say focus on your digital presence, focus on your ability to be seen, located, and heard from digitally, so that people can find you. Too many people have ignored their digital presence in the past few years, and I think now's the time you better focus on it.
I couldn't agree more. I know in talking with other media outlets and companies, we've been hearing that internet and website traffic has spiked 3 times. So it's just incredible and a great place to focus. Okay, we have Joe from Montreal. Joe is celebrating his 61st birthday. So happy birthday, Joe. Of course, we've got to ask your question. And so Joe wants to know what communication style leaders should be adopting during this time.
Well, first of all, happy birthday, Joe. 61. You're a baby compared to me. I feel I'm much older than you. Transparency, authenticity, having regular check-ins with your team, making sure that you're telling them, what you do know, offering them hope and encouragement. I think the number one thing we can do as leaders is just be transparent and accessible, and communicate more than less. I think those are the key things. Authenticity and honesty are very, very important right now.
Awesome. Thanks, Arlene. We've got a question coming in from Carl. And Carl is asking, what is your view of the role of formal education in promoting success? The cost of post-secondary education continues to be out of reach. So I think at the end of the day, when you're evaluating, what you should do next, or if post-secondary is a good option for you, how much do you attribute success to post-secondary?
I listen. I have honorary degrees, and I'm really grateful for them. But I never was able to go to university. I had to start working when I was quite young, and so I didn't get a chance to. But my father had a PhD in education, and he actually created the first self-based software system in the world. And he believed very much about people's ability to learn at their own speed and in their own ways. And he created a platform for that, and was really ahead of his time, became an entrepreneur very late in his life. And so education was very, very important. We were told it was important, and I believe it is critical. And I would encourage anybody to get an education and to continue to educate themselves. But if you can't get an education by going to a university or a post-secondary school, that doesn't mean you have to stop learning. It doesn't mean you can't go online and continue to excel and teach yourself new things and in new ways. But I do think it's important. I wish that education was free to everybody in this country. I think it should be. I think it is a right, not a privilege. And it's something that I would love to see changed. I don't know if it'll happen in my lifetime, but I do believe that university education should be accessible to everybody, not just to people who have money.
Agreed. Yeah, couldn't agree more. We've got a question coming in from Gavin, and Gavin is saying, post COVID-19, companies will need to reevaluate their supply chains. And so do you think Made in Canada is the new solution?
I think Made in Canada is so important right now because of this very issue. Supply chains are fragile. They're breaking apart in many places. There's a lot of disconnection between being able to get the access to the goods and the ingredients we need. And Canada is this nation, and I can only speak right now. Let me just talk about it from an ingredient perspective. From the food space, Canada is, and in the health space, we have not just the innovation in those spaces, but we have the raw ingredients to be able to turn them into products and export them. So I think Made in Canada is critical. I think our export opportunity is enormous. I don't believe, I have a fundamental belief that no stick should leave this country without value being added to it. In other words, we should not be just shipping our commodities all around the world for people to then turn into products so we can buy them back. So I think Made in Canada is critical. I'm a huge advocate for this. I believe strongly that we can't support Canadian companies enough. There's a global base of business out there, yes, but Canada can be a game changer as it relates to food, health, innovation, technology. There's so many places that we can win if we just focus on supporting Canadian business.
Agreed. I think a lot of companies right now are really refocusing their efforts to say, is my supply chain local? And if not, then how can I make some changes so that I can always have access to kind of the goods that I need to distribute to make money. So yeah, thank you for that answer. We've got Mark Stevenson, and his question to you, Arlene, is what are your thoughts on what recovery looks like for the food and hospitality industry?
Yeah, I mean, listen, in the food space, in the consumer goods space, the last mile space of retail, I think it's going to continue to grow and do well. I do think in the hospitality space, there's going to have to be a shift in terms of how people are thinking about their kitchens and their business models. I know I've been speaking to many people who are restaurateurs who are saying that their business that they're doing out their back door is now much more significant than the business they were doing out of their front door. In other words, their delivery services, their supplying meal kit companies, their opportunity to work directly to the consumer in their homes. These are the ways people are thinking about restaurants and hospitality in general. The hotel industries and the travel industries and those industries, I think are going to go through a seismic shift. It'll be interesting to see how they reinvent themselves so that they can make sure that they survive through this. But people will still, I believe, want to travel. People will still need to stay in hotels. I think we're just going to have different processes, models, and protocols in place so that people feel safe doing so.
Yeah, thanks for that. We've got our final question from our viewers, and this is coming from Karen. Karen is fundraising for her beauty tech company. She's struggling with the emotional battle and uncertainty. And so she's asking, what advice would you have for founders like Karen?
Yeah, Karen, I feel your pain. There's days where it's very hard. I've had moments where I really too feel like it can be overwhelming, and I would get back to my earlier comment around trying to find some time in the morning, if you can, to focus on things that are going to help your brain to disconnect from the negativity and the depressingness of all of this. Whether it's listening to a podcast, whether it's going for a walk, whether it's just playing and drawing and coloring, whether it's reading a book, anything that has nothing to do with what's actually happening in the world, so your mind can actually re-engage itself and think differently. And less news. Less news is better right now. We don't need to have 100. We don't need to see 100 articles on the same story in order to understand what the story is. And I think, kind of taking your time away from that is very, very important. I find physical activity and working out and eating well has been critical for me to help me survive through this. So I would encourage you to really think hard about what you're putting in your body. Are you treating yourself well? Self-care is very important through this period of time. So I can't stress it enough, whether it's meditation, whether it's mindfulness, whether it's listening to apps that are providing meditation, anything like that to kind of disconnect, I think is critical. So hang in there. We are going to get through this. I know we will. I know it's going to be okay on the other side of this, and it's going to be a little different, but it's going to be fine. And we just have to hold on to that belief and provide ourselves and let ourselves feel once in a while like this is pretty shitty. Put the covers over your head. It's okay to stay in bed for a day once in a while because you're feeling down, but then try and get up and motivate yourself by doing things that are going to help your mind to refocus and re-energize itself.
Yeah, I love all of that, Arlene. Thank you so much. I mean, I know for us at Elevate, this past week, we launched a wellness challenge. We launched a step challenge, and I can't tell you, how nice that's been, how important that's been for even my own mental of getting outside every day for an hour or 2 hour walk really just allows you to change perspective. And so I think, how we are treating our physical and mental wellness during this time, it has to take priority. Okay, that is all the time that we do have for today's show. Arlene, thank you so much. This has been so informative for myself, for our viewers, as we start to think about how to reinvent us as individuals and start to think of pivoting companies, given this new landscape of COVID-19. Is there anything else that you'd like to leave our audience here with today?
No, I really appreciate, Lisa, the opportunity to talk to so many of you and for the opportunity to talk about things that matter. And I do want to wish everybody success through their own reinvention and tell you that at the end of the day, who you are and what you believe in and what you aspire to belongs to you, and to make sure that you treat yourself well and to continue to dream big and to continue to believe that you can do what it is you need to do, because we sometimes lose faith in ourselves. And so I would start with have faith in yourself and, give yourself encouragement and believe in you, and play that tape in your head over and over again that you're good enough and you're strong enough and that you can get through this. And I wish you all of you nothing but well.
Well, Arlene, before you go, we've got a little surprise for you. We've got, as a token of our appreciation, we have planted the Arlene Dickinson Forest. It is in the Great Lakes St. Lawrence region, as my fellow co-founder and our CEO, Razor Sulman, reminds us every week. When we get out of this, there is a climate crisis that we need to address. And so knowing that by being on our show today, that you've done your part today.
Thank you so much. That's lovely. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you everyone for joining us this week. Make sure you tune back in next Wednesday, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We've got Aaron Levy, the co-founder and CEO of Box, on Work Unleashed. It's going to be a great episode. I want to give a big shout out and thanks to our entire production team for pulling together today's episode, and want to tell everyone, all of our viewers, stay healthy, stay safe, and take care of each other.